What? Whoa. Almost fell. Take two. What's going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 14 of the Foundation First Fitness Show with Bob Owen. Today we are going to talk about one of my favorite things in strength training, which is how to build a strong core. So for many of you that have followed me on Instagram or followed my social media stuff and have either worked with me or seen some of the stuff that I've done, you'll know that I am a big time core guy, and it's one of the things that I love to work on the most, and I think is probably one of the most vital things you can do in your workout. So how to kind of put it all together and make sure that you're getting a strong core is really important. There's kind of a couple of step process, and as much as I wanted to get in there and kind of pick out those exercises and talk about the exercise and go right into the detail, I knew that I had to kind of keep this as superficial as possible and really just kind of give you guys a template on what to follow. So what I would say is that this is a 4-step process, and it's not going to really be targeted towards any specific person. So if you're someone that needs to play a specific sport, well, then you're going to need a little bit more detail into the specific exercises based on the sport, because you're going to want to balance off those dependencies or those kind of compensations that you're going to develop in your sport. So the thing that's really interesting with this 4-step process that I've kind of noticed after looking it over a couple of times is that it basically kind of covers everything, like from a very superficial way, but at the same time, it's really easy to see where the lines are drawn between all the different ways of training the core. So there's so many different things that we can do, and there's so many different exercises that we can introduce, and understanding how to get all of them to kind of be, nice and stable and nice and perfect and kind of have a good understanding of each of them and then progressing through is really something that has a huge impact on your progress in your core training. So core training is something that can really be done for anybody. Like, this is a plan that not only works for athletes, it works for the weekend warrior, someone who's biking a lot, someone who's running a lot, someone who's working at home, or someone who's just kind of trying to stay away from fend off some like low back issues or some shoulder issues or anything like that, or wants to keep a nice core, keep a nice posture. This is a great kind of 4-step process that you can kind of work through and kind of piece together and put some exercises into that kind of process and really start benefiting from some good strong core. So enough of discussing it, let's just get right into it. So the first thing is step 1, which is going to be making sure that you're stable in all 4 planes. So 4 planes, I mean 4 sides. So basically what that means is you're going to want to go anterior, so the front of your core. You're going to want to go side, the back, and the other side. I mean, I could have said 3 and go front, side, back, but for argument's sake, all 4. So the interesting thing about all 4 is that what we want to do is we want to maintain kind of that stability. So I'm going to go just to let you guys know, before I go any further, I will be putting all 4 steps in the show notes as usual. And I will throw in some exercise options for some of those different ones to give you guys kind of something to play around with and kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about in terms of the detailed exercises, so that you can kind of follow along and get an idea of what I'm talking about. So when you're trying to stabilize all 4, the reason why we want to make sure that we're not moving is because the less movement we have, the more accuracy we have in that. So we want to make sure that we've got that kind of foundation built, that solid foundation of the entire core, and get a good understanding of how our body needs to maintain a specific position for an extended period of time. It doesn't have to be crazy long. I'll get into a little bit of detail on that, but being able to stabilize the body before we start adding on and we start introducing some movements or some perturbations that are going to cause the body to kind of fall off course, and trying to maintain that, what I usually I haven't termed it, but I usually call neutral spine position. So a good example of, let's say, an interior core exercise would be a plank. Now, there is a lot of talk in recent news about how an extended period of time planking is not going to help you and is not going to do great great work for you, but it is huge to get started. Now, what you don't want to do is spend your entire life in a plank position and just live there and do it all the time and try to go out for 2 minutes. But basically, the threshold that I like to bring out to people is at 45 seconds to a minute. Anything over that, and it's really just overkill. A minute plank is more than enough. Once you've mastered that minute and it's become somewhat comfortable, we have to progress with that. We have to start adding to it, because anything more than a minute and that endurance just starts kind of falling off, and the benefits aren't really there, because it's such a I guess in terms of a maximal contraction, we don't really need it to go that high in volume. The endurance level is not really that important on that exercise. Same thing, side plank for the sides. You want to get that nice side plank. I went over it on I believe it was one of my Instagram posts where I talked about staggering the legs and how to get the hip involved, because the hip is so key in making sure that our hip is not too high, and at the same time we're not kind of rolling and spinning off. That's one of the huge things. So I do go over a couple of pointers, which is like jam the elbow in, stagger the legs, bring the hip forward, and make sure you got that nice alignment through the neck, because training core is not just about getting that six pack and making sure that everything between, our hip to our upper shoulders or our bottom of our ribs, if you want to make it even more narrow, is not just, it's not based solely on that, but it's really based on controlling the entire body as a whole. And that head is a big portion of that and a big component of that. So we want to make sure that everything through that entire segment is just locked on. So step 2 is going to be moving through all parts. So basically you want to be able to stabilize in a specific position and start adding in some movements. So whether it's going to be being in a push-up position, which is kind of like a modified plank, and then reaching out or touching the shoulders or lifting the legs up, and doing that kind of stuff is going to be your next phase. It's going to be that next significant jump, where you're going to be kind of stabilizing the core and now adding in some movements. At the same time, you can even bring it down a step and go into something like a bird dog, which is basically on all fours in like a crawling position, arms extended, and then you're reaching out your opposite leg and arm, and then you're coming back and then reaching the other leg and arm, and trying to maintain a nice stable hip and stable core. That's another great exercise you can do too. It's a little bit easier than being up in a push-up position and trying to do it, because there's less stress on that hip, but it's going to call upon a lot of the stabilizing the hip while moving the segments. And that's where you're going to really get in that second phase. So same thing, if I was on the side and, kicking my legs out and bringing it up, and getting that done. Now, I did just realize that I completely forgot about the back on the stable 4. So I'm going to jump back to that. Sorry about that for those of you who are listening and who are kind of wondering, like, what about the back? For the back, a good exercise would be a bridge. So lying on your back, bending the knees, pulling up, getting up on a bridge is going to strengthen the core in incorporating that posterior chain. So that's really important. We want to make sure we do that too. So bridge for the back, side planks for the sides, and plank for the front is going to be a good starting point. Very basic. Everyone kind of knows what that is. If you don't, I'll post kind of a description for those as well. Once we've done through step 2, starting to move through all those segments. So on your back would be like doing a bridge and then kicking your legs out and kind of getting kind of a tabletop pattern, or just going up and down through the bridge is another way of training the core from the posterior aspect, which is another really important component. So once we've done that, the next thing is to really try loading the body. Now you can start in the kneeling position and load the body, and then try challenging the core by preventing rotation, preventing extension, preventing flexion. So preventing that kind of forward bend, or preventing that falling backwards, as well as preventing that rotation. This is going to be that first time where we're actually going to be loaded and kind of preventing that rotation. So it's really important. That's going to be loading the rotation. Basically, if we go back to step 2 and I start moving my arm, the first thing that's going to happen is my body's going to want to try to rotate and fall forward, and we're going to try to prevent against that. It is challenging, but the time where it's the most challenging, the biggest step for rotation, is going to be when we go from the lying position, so the ground positions, all fours, and then we start bringing it to two-legged position. We try to prevent rotation. That's where our body's going to start trying to find the biggest compensation. So we got to be very careful for that. Now, once we've done the legs, we go from kneeling, we go to standing, and we try preventing the rotation. So a pallof press is a great exercise. and we try to prevent that rotation from happening. So we understand how to move our arms, potentially even hold that pallof position, start doing a side set where you try to take steps out to the side and back in without losing that rotation from the top, and kind of messing around with that is another great way to can kind of get that rotation, get that kind of mix going on. Step 4 would be adding rotation. So now we're actually trying to create movement, whether it's staggered leg, both legs together, whatever it may be. Once we start adding that rotation, it's about the nice fluidity of that movement. So it's going to be like golf. You want the power to be nice and smooth. You don't want it to, it's a very graceful movement. It can't be explosive and just raw and try to muscle and push your way through it. It's got to be nice and smooth, and that's what's going to really define that nice rotational component when you're trying to do a core exercise. So putting all those 4 together and kind of playing all that out and going step by step and really mastering each step is going to be the best way for you guys to build a core and build a nice solid core that you can add stuff to. You can add the lunges, you can add the squats. Doing all that is going to really help you out. So if you guys have any questions, you know how to get in touch with me. And until the next time, guys, keep building that foundation.